Have you also heard of the suggestions and fears that accompany the 29th of February? What does this date really hold? Are those who see this day as something disastrous right? And what secrets does destiny keep on that day so special that it appears in the calendar only every 4 years? In the Zen story you are about to listen to, we will explore together what lies behind this enigmatic date. So stay until the end because it will be a fascinating journey between reality and superstition in which Buddhist wisdom will help us understand what many cannot see. But before continuing, if you are not yet one of us, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to be updated when we publish new content. In a remote Buddhist monastery nestled among the surrounding green hills and majestic mountains, the wise monk Kosami found himself sitting in a meditation hall surrounded by his devoted disciples. It was a quiet winter day, close to the 29th of February many years ago, and the disciples had gathered around their master with a question that anguished them. Kosami, with a serene face and penetrating eyes, observed his disciples carefully, perceiving the tension that enveloped them. "What is it that disturbs you so deeply, my dears?" he asked in a calm voice. One of the disciples, visibly worried, came forward. "Master," he began uncertainly, "we have heard rumors that in a few days, exactly on the 29th of February, something terrible will happen. It seems that the leap year has always brought with it great misfortunes, and something horrendous could soon spill over into our lives. It is true." The monk smiled slightly, observing the reaction of his disciples. "The leap year," he replied enigmatically, "is a very fascinating and emotionally charged moment in the cycle of time. But before we talk about that and see where things stand on that matter, let me share a story with you." The disciples approached carefully, eager to listen to the words of their beloved master and understand more about this disturbing date. "Once, a long time ago," Kosami began, "there was a farmer who lived in a small, modest house on the edge of a village. This farmer, despite the adversities that life presented to him, was known for his wisdom, his emotional balance, and his serenity. Thanks to his knowledge," continued the monk, "he knew how to cultivate his own field and maintain balance with the surrounding nature. But one day, just before the 29th of February, while conversing with a passing traveler, he heard about the legend of the leap year for the first time. The disciples got even closer to their mentor, intrigued by the farmer's story and the veil of uneasiness that hovered in the air. According to this legend, Kosami continued, the leap year was considered a time of great misfortune, where fate might turn against those who did not prepare adequately. And February 29th, in particular, was a date on which many people lived in terror, convinced that something terrible would happen. The disciples looked at each other, noticing how the anxiety growing in their hearts was increasingly palpable. But the farmer, Kosami said, was not disturbed by these rumors. Rather than fear the leap year and that day in particular, he chose to live with gratitude and awareness, doing his best every day to cultivate his land and help those in need. The disciples listened carefully, reflecting on the meaning of their master's words and perceiving that a glimmer of light and hope was about to open. And in the end, concluded Kosami, the farmer discovered that on the 29th of February of that year, the best thing in his life happened. He became the father of a splendid little girl. From that moment on, he focused solely on his family and the beautiful things he wanted to achieve, and lived a life full of prosperity and happiness, proving that destiny is not written in the stars, but in our actions and choices. Meanwhile, in a village not far from the monastery, there lived a man named Tanai, known for being extremely superstitious and being driven by fear in all things he did. Tanai, when he heard about the misfortunes associated with the leap year, was terrified to the point that, on the 29th of February, he locked himself in his house to avoid any contact with the outside world. As chance would have it, in those very hours, he felt ill and discovered that he had a health problem that would force him to bed for a few months. This negative coincidence, as you can imagine, was burned into his mind. So, instead of following the example of the wise farmer we talked about before and living with gratitude and serenity, Tanai fell victim to his fears and was no longer able to leave them behind. He began to avoid any type of risky activity during the leap year, convinced that any misstep could lead to imminent tragedy, and soon this attitude of his spread even in non-leap years. This fear paralyzed him, preventing him from pursuing the dreams he had had since childhood and from living his life fully. He began to suffer from anxiety attacks, and his superstition made his worst omens come true. In the end, Tanai found himself alone and embittered, aware that his superstition had irreparably ruined his existence and that of the people closest to him. The disciples remained silent, meditating on their master's words and on the substantial difference between the two stories and the two types of people Kosami had spoken about. Slowly, the tension that had surrounded them melted away, replaced by a feeling of calm and understanding. Kosami, observing the change in the faces of his disciples, smiled again, happy to have lifted their spirits. "Always remember," he said in a quiet voice, "that true strength lies within you. Don't let superstitions or limiting beliefs deprive you of the joy and serenity we deserve." The disciples nodded respectfully, internalizing their master's wise words. The stories of the farmer and the superstitious man had made them understand that everything depended on how we treated life and events. Then, one of them raised his hand and asked, "Master, why does leap year exist? And how did this superstition around it develop?" Kosami smiled understandingly, appreciating their extreme curiosity. "The leap year," he began, "is an invention that derives from the need to align the solar calendar with the tropical year, that is, the time it takes the Earth to complete one complete revolution around the Sun. This cycle lasts approximately 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45 seconds. To keep the calendar aligned with the seasons," Kosami continued, "it is necessary to add an extra day every 4 years. This extra day is what we call the leap year." The disciples nodded, demonstrating that they understood the explanation and feeling increasingly relieved. They were beginning to understand that, perhaps, nothing so disastrous was hidden behind the date of February 29th. As for the superstition surrounding it, Kosami said, "It has developed over the centuries, fueled by fear of the unknown and the human tendency to seek explanations for events beyond our control. Leap year, being an irregularity in the calendar, has attracted attention and become an object of superstition for many cultures over time. As the golden light of the sunset filtered through the windows, enveloping the meditation hall in a warm and enveloping atmosphere, Kosami added, every heartbeat, every breath we take is a precious gift of inestimable value. Yet too often we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by fears of the future or regrets of the past, forgetting to fully live the present in order to build the life we desire. Every year, every month, every day is an opportunity to grow, learn, and love," Kosami continued, "and yet we often allow ourselves to be deceived by superstitions, by limiting beliefs that prevent us from seeing the beauty and richness of life that surrounds us. Always remember that true wisdom lies in recognizing that we ourselves are the creators of our own destiny. Don't let limiting beliefs deprive you of the joy and serenity we deserve."